I guess we could simply move into play. Is that
Yeah,
where
why
you're
not?
at?
So my memory is kind of when we left it. I'd entered, if you like, the darkness of um, the vegetation was growing rampant, and yeah, I'd willingly kind of submitted while the others had kind of fled.
Hmm.
Um, so I guess that's kind of a reasonable starting place there. Or do you want to move further on and start with some time having passed?
Well, no, I think that we're talking about a sort of a conversation worth having. The Technically we are still using the map, but it's not really all that important because there's no way Jonathan is going to be able to orient inside that map.
Right. Yeah.
And so so I can just describe the circumstances in she she uses darkness rune magic to whisk you through darkness portals to a particular portion of that complex. And so this is sort of one of the problems with, I think, when one would be playing with a troll setting in the original RuneQuest. You really are talking about darkness, and so our usual reference of sight is no longer, possible.
Hmm.
Um, but So pretty much but by definition, she would cast dark sea upon you. So you would be sensing things with an awareness of them that is arguably superior to sight in this context.
Yeah.
It's just that you're not using your eyes to do it. So through that, um, you can you can perceive that you're in a portion of this complex which is a little more built up, a little more developed, than the parts that you've seen.
Yeah.
Some of the
Okay.
parts you've seen has been more of a sort of a um, I mean, you were in one of the areas that's pretty much left to be a bunch of semi-natural barriers and problems for people, like with that pit and stuff like that. Once you get past that, you're into ritual space.
Right.
So the since Carva doesn't have to like use ordinary walking through tunnels to get here, therefore um, there's a big discontinuity in what's back here and what's over there. I guess to be obvious about it, if you go to some of the ritual spaces in Green Rock, in the jumbled, in the messed up village over there that you encountered, then you could go directly to these areas through darknessy,
Yeah.
portals. So
So it's what my impression I'm getting from you, in a sense, would be my metaphor might be that I'm a kind of the center of the spider's web, right? That
well, in
there's
some ways,
all
it's
these
not.
strands that lead out to Green Rock and places like that. Darkness more than anything else, and
Right.
that here you can almost feel the vibrations along the strands coming to
Possibly,
you.
I think that it's worth remembering that she's very isolated. So it's not like Crushed in Glorantha, where all these strands
Yeah,
go all over the place. That instead, this is more like where, I mean, anybody wanting to talk to her came to Green Rock and then communicated through there, or if they were uh, accompanied or were privileged in some way, could actually go physically into these tunnels. But the but no, it's not really like a headquarters. It's more like
right,
a retreat. So,
right, okay,
but it's also really strange and magical. So I'm actually going to say that it's perfectly circular. It's like the walls of the enclosure that you are in are absolutely circular, geometrically perfect circle. And that's the the sense that you're using instantly identifies that the primary composition of the circular enclosure is vegetation. but it's all vegetation that has been so compressed and so thoroughly uh, squished, by growth, that it's dead. And so only it's like it's growing inward, and something's killing it at this periphery, at this perimeter. So you get kind of this spongy, squashed, you know, layer that's
Right.
continually, desiccating away, but is continually, also being replenished from outside. So, and then above, that's at sort of ground level. Um, Somebody, presumably Carva, has spent a considerable amount of time putting stones in that periphery as well, so that it is almost completely walled, um, but not in any kind of really well structured way. I mean, it's a little,
Right.
they're stacked rather than just thrown there or piled, but it's not like an expert masonry or something.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you've got, but it is a very solid barrier now,
So more like
whereas,
a what we've called a dry stone wall. Do
yeah,
you have those
I'd
over
say
there in
so.
Sweden? Yeah. Okay.
To some
Yeah.
extent, yes. The other important point of this is that it is open. It is open to the air. It's not underground. And so this is kind of the weird thing. One thinks of darkness as, and trolls and Lorantha as underground.
Right.
This is not underground. The whole complex that you guys had been through was only partly underground
Right.
anyway.
Yep.
So, and this part is not, but no natural light enters. The magic of this spot just obviates natural light entirely. So it's just not there. Um,
Yeah, because she's both a goddess of the wild and darkness. So
correct.
there's an interesting
Hmm.
kind
Yeah,
of combination there.
the runes are darkness and plant, and then in motion, mobility. The Then the subcult of Rishihimla is water and spirit. So then the hero cult of Kar is just taking the darkness rune and really, 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 really pushing it
Mm.
as far as it can go. Um, so this is sort of the place. I mean, what's in it, as well as Carva herself, is kind of oddly normal or personal, in that it's a pallet that somebody, that she presumably sleeps on, and some scattered utensils that one might use for eating, or several other sort of sundry personal items, mostly pretty scattered, and you know, uh, if somebody doesn't care, they just throw whatever they're not using just around. So that is somewhat off center in this circle. The But it's also a little pathetic. There's nothing there, except well, here's some loose clothes that nobody cares about. It's not as though she cares much about her clothes. There's um, a few other items scattered there. Um, and so, but otherwise, it's really bare. I mean, the somebody, presumably her, has spent a lot of time clearing this space. Um, and it's cold, really, really, really freaking cold. It's there's no, uh, I mean, you're open to the other elements. So, there you stand in this space. Carva is there. She is actually smaller than you. And she's, wearing, as I described before, some kind of, overgarment that's open in front and fairly, you know, unkempt, and nothing else. The effect is extremely non erotic, because her body has been pretty thoroughly scarred, and so, or even mutilated. And so, and yet the one thing that's totally different now for you, because you're using this dark sense, is that the rune that has been basically painted onto her, or etched even into her upper face, you still don't know whether that comes off or not, is no longer, I mean, you can sense it magically, but because it's just a very powerful magical presence, but you actually can sense her face as a face, because this sense is almost more tactile, than it is visual. It's not visual at all. So it's almost as though I mean, sound is vibration,
Hmm.
but it's now as though you're sensing sounds through a different sense that also picks up vibrations. You'll find that Carva communicates in this medium extremely effectively. So, changes in her voice tone, changes in her body posture all convey meaning in ways that otherwise would take a lot of words. So it's not just talking. So,
Yeah.
okay. So the first thing she will say to you is, um, so things have changed. Someone has to tell me about it.
I can tell you what I know. There were those who sought to dominate the community with the goddess's power, not just to protect the community against the power of the chieftain, but to intimidate and oppress everybody else. And they sought to force at anyone who they saw as a challenge to the goddess's authority, the shaman, Des, and for me, they began to go too far. They invited me to murder, my kin, many of whom I don't believe had anywhere opposed the goddess directly. They were just living their lives, and ultimately they pushed the community too far, and the community stood up and said no. And many of the goddess's servants were forced out, rounded up. There was a fight. Many were killed, and she has lost, influence amongst the people from what happened. That you can use. You can talk about the power of the goddess of nature, and that's just something I was raised as a hunter. I was by the settled space of the town into nature, which many of those who live in the town are frightened of. I learnt that yes, you should be respectful and frightened of nature, but that we could have come to accommodation with it, and that was the goddess that I sought. But if you push people far enough with this idea of using the fear of nature to oppress people, eventually that they will break, and that's what happened. So, and I don't know whether this came from you or simply those who have been the interface you have had to the outside world. But I wanted to learn more of the goddess and her secrets, but the direction that it went seemed too strong. That she should call for me to kill seemingly at random. I understand sacrifice. I understand the notion that the community must give to her. But this didn't seem like, sacrifice. This just seemed like slaughter.
There's some hope for you. And I see what you could become. But it will take more from you than I think you want to give now. I'm trying to think because Carva didn't really know what Oniv said to you or anything like that. And she's nowhere near the she has a different mindset. Do you know why Ord Lindas and Wendrara cannot thrive here? Do you know why they are weak and is strong?
Tell me.
The way of Black Car. Everywhere else, there must be compromise. Everywhere else, they have their way in the villages. They have their way with the populace. They have their way with the society. And war rages. Secrets rule. Here, no war comes. Here, the chieftain and the mother ask. They do not push back. And yes, like it or not, Jonathan, the people must pay, and the people must obey, and the people must live in fear. But they fear something worth fearing. They fear something large and real. They do not fear one another. Black Car strikes back. The way of the goddess alone is that of simple growth, random motion, lack of direction. My way, our way, your way, if you can, is to use the darkness to strike, to fight, and to win.
And I know that it's true that many of the people that came to our community came because they were fleeing the war and the secrets that had ripped apart so many other communities, and they found peace here. But it feels, and if the price that the goddess demands is a better price than that continual war, then I understand why many would choose that, and as you say, to fear her, but gain her protection from that, from that is better than perhaps the alternative. But you say that the key is that they feared something real, the power of nature, rather than each other. But yet, what had happened in our community is they'd begun to fear each other. And that's where
all that happened that I see, all that happened that's important, is that Oniv is dead and you stand here and you are a child of You won. Now you have to choose whether you are going to continue to ally with the abominations of light, which you brought here. I have not forgotten. Or whether you are going to walk further with me.
I understand. I been a boy for so long that it is difficult to make what must be a man's choice, because whatever choice I make, it's compromise for my ideals. And yet I think the only choice I can make is one that in some sense protects the widest number of people in the community. I don't believe that a return to the killing of the chieftain is necessarily a better way. And I do not know that the gods of light for their help in removing some of the oppression would not equally be as oppressive if left unchecked. But what I would seek is, if I represented her, would be not to allow the balance to be so badly skewed again within the community.
That means that you would be more watchful toward them. Should someone like Oniv arise again, you would act. And
Indeed.
I would at last like to see for myself. I would like to walk again out of these places where
I think you should.
A little bit lost.
I think that would be good. I think it would be good if you
then come here. And you can see now that she's holding a short, curved wooden knife.
Okay, well, I'll approach it. I mean, I don't know whether he's being brave but I mean, whatever choices he makes here there is no easy route out. So he's going to move forward on the basis of, well, what other choices do I have?
All right, so let's think for a moment here. In RuneQuest, there is a generic initiation roll.
There is one, yeah.
Also, by this point, your character should have opened a. I don't know if you had it already. I think you may have. You may have had a lore defined as cult lore as a skill.
Yeah, I don't know whether I've actually written that down. How?
If I'm remembering correctly, it was power plus charisma, and then you multiply that by 3/5.
Yeah,
and then of course there was money involved, but that's the generic role. There, if you go to the cults books, then each god or religion, each sect, has its own specialized version.
Become an initiate. Okay. Use the following formula: add the power and the charisma of the character, then add 1 for every 100 lunas the character gives to the cult an offering. Divide by 3, multiply by 5.
Yeah, that's so I remembered it correctly. But in this case, we're going to shift that around a little bit because, for one thing, money isn't really the issue. Right. And I think there's some of the other ones involve skills as well. That's why I was interested in that cult lore skill. It always struck me as that's kind of important in initiations, to demonstrate your knowledge of something. So that needs to get factored in somehow. And so your cult lore skill started at 5% plus your knowledge bonus, whatever that was.
Right.
And so
Jonathan's knowledge bonus is +0. So he would have 5% cult lore.
Right. So just on the off chance, roll that. Just the 5% roll, just in case. You never know if you're going to hit it.
52. So that's no good.
Okay. Actually, I think probably a sort of training scroll bonus of, let's see, it would be a D4%. D4 times 5%. Would apply by now after all of your exposure. So we're going to up that by rolling. Oh my God, I rolled a 4. Add 20% to that. So you've got a 25% in your cult lore.
Right.
So you've basically been, very thoroughly. I would say all these experiences have really racked up your understanding of what you've been, into.
Yeah, that
So
seems fair.
yeah. So therefore, we can take your power and your charisma, which together
Yep,
make what?
23.
23. So then we would let's see. So converting that to for a second there, I'm going to, if we convert your 25% into the same units of uh as the attributes, you divide by 5. That's what that 5 is doing in there, by the way. The
Right.
divisor by 5. It's going from 1 to 20 to 1 through 100. That's why it's
Yeah.
there. So we're just going to do that. We're going to say add 5. So you said 23,
Yep.
right? And so then add 5 to that makes 28. Oh, then you multiply that by 3. Okay, we've already divided by 5. So okay, that's good. Right. So then you multiply that by 3. So 28 times 3, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got an 84% chance of being
Right.
properly initiated.
Right. Well, we'll give that a roll.
Hmm.
20.
All right then. So you've successfully become an initiate of and you
Mm.
are going to have some body scarring that she inflicts upon you as part of it. We can talk a little bit more about like what rune spell she's going to imbue upon you. The first one that I imagine she must provide to you is the same one that she's used on you already. So you now
Yeah.
have a one use of Dark Sea.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Right.
sense to me.
Yeah. So but this is kind of interesting. You and she are going to kind of have to develop a bit of a relationship, and I'm going to uh leave it kind of up to you. Um you're going to have to make your way back to Green Rock eventually, but not yet. If we were to continue to play, the interaction between you and Alkerton would have to become kind of interesting,
Yeah,
because
indeed.
the his choice as a player would be whether to actually try to take Rudiver's advice, who will be urging the resumption of Vrisha Himla out of control,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
that would be kind of interesting because, obviously Black Car has no intention of letting any such thing occur. So
Right. Yeah. No, I
yeah,
think in resume play, Alcaton and I would definitely rival for the
right,
future direction of the community
right,
because
right,
I think Jonathan is actually, of the belief that perhaps there was a lot of good
right,
in this community that lacked the continual conflict of other
right.
communities around.
Well, and there's another issue as well, that we can talk about another time if we were to continue to play, which has to do with the god Urhos, the secret one, the sacrificer who lives in the center of every community. Um, so with him, with that worship gone, because they were rooted out as well, if you recall.
Yep.
With that worship gone, but with their altar still there in the village, because nobody would dare. I mean, if somebody wants to go and try and destroy that, that's a
Mm.
whole adventure right there. So so that's an interesting question. There's a lot of potential here at Green Rock Way. Um, so the
Yeah.
but the deal is that what now? Carva is going to um, Carva and you need to go on an adventure. You need to go on a restoration of some kind of Green Rock, not just Green Rock Way, but Green Rock, and to um, I think to try to establish a different relationship between her and the local wilderness.
Yeah.
I think that there are a couple of things that she's going to really be into doing, probably actually against the incursion of stickmen would be part of it. And so that would be where we would go. There would be stuff for you to do before the eventual, difficult decisions about Greenwalk Way have to be made.
Yeah, and I'm
So
sure
that's,
also, if we were to play that through, Jonathan would probably have had some time to move in that direction before I returned.
oh,
So I would return
absolutely.
to a
No,
quite
I would.
different Green Rock.
That's exactly right. And there'd also be a fair amount of room for the character to grow and exercise different skills and stuff like that, so that by the time we move to that level of discussion or drama, then both you and Alkerton would be much bigger characters. But everybody's scattered now. Alkerton's on his own over at Green Rock Way. You're here in these weird pseudo dimensions of darkness and wilderness, and June and Benry are off in a completely different community somewhere, you know, um, subject to a completely
Yeah,
different set of magic. So really, there wasn't much else to go or through or play, just to basically set up a little bit of dialogue. And I'm not sure I'm up for role playing Carva too intensely because, frankly, she's batshit crazy. So
yeah. I think also
so
the
so
key thing
that's
anyway, really,
yeah,
from the point of view of the game, is what was Jonathan's choice going to be at
right,
that point,
right. That's what I was
right?
mostly interested in. And
Yeah,
so
was he going to
yeah,
choose to follow the path
yeah.
of Oom, which he looked like he was going to step away from,
Right. But
or
but
was he
now he
going
gets to sort of define the path as well as
to?
choose it.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
it's
So
so
I think
he's got a little
he sees
hope
it
in
as
there.
something different.
Yeah, what's kind of interesting, of course, is that Carva's completely cynical about such things, maybe even more
Yeah.
so than Oniv. And
Sure.
so, but Carva's also willing to see where this goes.
Sure. And I think Jonathan at the minute is,
Yeah.
of course, the naivety.
So it should
For
be,
I
yeah,
believe it's possible to have a different regime of using
right,
using the goddess.
exactly.
And
And as
it'd be
long as you're
interesting to
thinking,
discover whether that's true or not.
exactly, yeah,
And if he gets more drawn into what the goddess has to do to protect the community against
hmm,
the stickman, against the chieftain,
right,
particularly if he goes back and
right.
discovers a
Then
community
we
that's very
discover
negative
sort of
side.
more of a Hero Wars level of play
Right.
at that
But
point.
then he gets into the whole level of
Right.
um, maybe the reason that these people went down this path is because they were forced to by the other
Yeah.
forces, essentially, and we
If we
couldn't
talk,
see
yeah,
those anymore.
if we talk about this setting as I conceive it, it's kind of interesting. It doesn't take the point of view that once all the gods were in balance, then everything went a little bit funny, and all you can do, if you restore the balance, then society will heal. That's really not where I'm coming from. As far as I'm concerned, each of these gods, the four, is appalling.
Yeah,
And that conceivably in some distant past, some positive form of them existed. But that's long lost. And that what you have is, a really disgusting interplay of fear of enemies via the chieftain, fear of one another's knowledge, fear of one another's, secret powers with the mother, and fear of the wild, fear of not being in, what happens if society's not protecting you via and then basically nothing but raw serial murder
mm,
at the heart of it all, and it's just really bad. And then making the new godlings of light nowhere near as malevolent, but on the other hand, so reckless, ruthless, and unbridled in their, in their applications, in what, every one of them goes too far if you want it.
yeah,
I mean, there's where there's a little bit of glorantha. They're illuminated basically, so that
mm,
means that yes, they understand things better or have a different way of looking at it, which is better than the old way, at the start. But the fact is, there's no break.
mm.
And so, who will do what with it?
Right. So this
Well,
notion that effectively the kind of extrajudicial killings
right. Yeah,
would be
exactly.
fine, provided they're killing people that you agree need to
Exactly.
die.
Right. And so, and the same thing goes with some of the others that, you haven't seen. I'm quite liking the one that I made up called Mari, who is very much about unbridled sensuality. and looks on the face of it basically like the perfect hippie chick, just the best
Mm.
possible, completely summer of love, sort. And then they're saying, okay, well then what happens to human relationships when you get that uninhibited?
I mean, it's an issue one for players as well, because there's always this choice then in something like this, isn't it? Between, well, I guess there are three sort of choices. One is I embrace the
Mm-hmm.
evil. Two is the evil is so repulsive to me, I reject all of it.
Right.
But the third
Right.
choice, which I think is occasionally sometimes more interesting, is can I reform
Right.
these cults to be closer to what the original vision of them may have been? Can I unwind?
Right. Or even just make a new thing,
Yeah.
and I threw in enough elements so that I hope there's raw material for that sort of thing in later play. If you know it's very much sort of one step at a time. I have no idea what the vision of
Yeah.
later play really is. And I also like the idea of just going aesthetically. All I really wanted was kind of rural coming of age fantasy with a
Mm.
lot of weirdness, and just stepping a little bit, outer from there as play brings us along, is fine by me.